Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, one of the civic partners for this show. Today we have Leigh Ward and Jeff Reifensnyder in the studio with us. They are from the Independent Living Center, which is located with two offices in Massena and Malone, and they're going to be talking to us about the important work that they do. Thank you very much for coming in, both of you. It's wonderful to have you here. Jeff is the executive director, and Leigh is the independent living resource specialist with the center. Like a lot of people, I've heard of your agency, but I don't really know much about it. So let's give folks some background about your agency and its history, Jeff, so that folks get a sense of who you are and how long you've been doing this work.
Well, let me give you a little idea of where we came from before I talk about our history here in St. Lawrence County.
Okay.
Independent living is a movement. It's a movement that started in the 1960s when people with disabilities saw what was going on with people of color, the women's movement, equal rights, and people with disabilities really saw that as an opportunity to jump on a bandwagon and champion civil rights for them, you know? Mm-hmm. Right now there's 500 independent living centers across the country. The first one was established at Berkeley, and it was set up by a gentleman named Ed Roberts, and I actually got a chance to meet Ed. And he was going to college with two other students with disabilities, and the campus was totally inaccessible. Mm-hmm. So they were taking their classes in the library. And from that, they applied for a grant to start a program on the campus to look at the handicap accessibility and make recommendations. But the success of that then branched out into, I believe, 10 in California within 2 years. And now across the country there are 500 centers for independent living, and there's 39 in New York.
Wow, that's a lot more than I was aware of. And so you're part of, this is all part of the social justice movement that came out of the 60s, and it's trying to help people be able to live as fully as they can without the barriers that society had put up before there was any awareness of those, how those barriers were affecting various groups.
Yes, yes. Well, and as far as how long we've been around, I can tell you that we had our annual dinner. When was that? It was snowing, so it could have been yesterday. It was, yeah, and staff and the board were all there, and all of a sudden they wheeled out a cake with 30 years on it. And I believe my reaction was, I've been here 30 years already? Because time has really flown since I graduated college, took my first job, which was program director for the Independent Living Center. We had 3 people on staff at the time. So I was director, peer counselor, and van driver at the time.
Chief cook and bottle washer.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And right now we have 33 people on staff.
Wow, so you have grown a lot over the years. Now tell me, these 500 centers across the country and the 39 here in New York State, are they closely affiliated or loosely affiliated? Is it an overarching organization, or is each one of you kind of handling things a little bit on your own?
Well, each one of us is a private, not-for-profit, 501c3 organization, independently run by a board of directors, a local board of directors. We're quite non-traditional in that we are peer-run grassroots organizations. So it's mandated that 51% of our board of directors and staff be people with disabilities themselves. That certainly does add to the commitment of people to a mission which is pretty much directed at their ascension in life above maybe their own expectations, but certainly other people's expectations for them.
Right.
So we do have an affiliation, particularly when it comes to advocacy matters, whether on a local, state, or national level, on issues that affect people with disabilities.
Sure. Now, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is the geographic territory that you are covering. I know you have an office in Massena and one in Malone, but you expand out beyond just Franklin and St. Lawrence counties, don't you?
Yeah, actually, we have just expanded into Jefferson and Lewis.
Okay.
So we're covering St. Lawrence, Franklin, Jefferson, and Lewis counties. We actually have 4 offices now.
Oh, do you?
Yeah,
Oh,
we just
okay.
opened 2 new ones, and one is
Okay.
over in Ogdensburg on Patterson Street, and there's one in Watertown on Washington Street.
And that makes a lot of sense because the population that you're serving has the same transportation barriers that all of us face up here in the North Country when we have to get to where we need to be to get the services that are going to be important to us.
Well, transportation in St. Lawrence County is something I've been interested in looking at helping solve for 30 years, and it could devote a couple of programs just to that concept.
Yes, I think you're
Yes.
right. So talk to us a little bit about the population that you serve in terms of their ages, the types of disabilities that they might have, how you interact with other government agencies.
Leigh, you want to take that?
Sure, so we serve people of all ages,
Okay.
Not just as people with disabilities, but we serve the community organizations. Basically, anybody who contacts us, we will at least provide information and assistance getting them where they need to go.
So you'll do a little bit of an assessment first to see if there's a better place for them to go or whether they do fit into
Right.
your parameters. Well, that's good. So Leigh, talk a little bit about that array of services that you can offer, if you would, please.
Okay, so some of our core services include information and referral, and then we do a lot of peer counseling, benefits advisement, advocacy, individual advocacy, independent living skills training.
Right? So, and you do that in your offices through, do you have like classroom space, or how does that work?
No, it's individualized, so either the person that is coming to us for help would come into the office, or we would go to them, either in their
Okay.
home or in a public location that they were comfortable with.
Sure.
And what services we provided for them was totally individualized,
Okay.
so it's based on what they need.
So assessing that is a big part of the jobs that you do. It sounds like it's almost all one-on-one, really. You can't really just come up with a lump sum of services and say, here, these 6 people are going to fit into that. You really have to do a lot of work with folks, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well,
So you had mentioned, Jeff, that you have 33 people now that in your staff, and that's between your 4 offices?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and how many clients would you have on an average, on an average basis?
well, last year we served a little over 2,000,
Okay.
and we're at mid-year now, and we're at 1,100. So I'm sure we will surpass that. I did want to add that the services that Leigh is talking about are associated with our core funding,
Okay.
which is our core independent living funding. Funding comes from New York State Education Department. And those services are absolutely directed at the independent living needs of the people that come to us. But we also have a number of other programs, and I just like to touch on them if I
Oh,
could
yes,
for a
please
second,
do. That's what
right?
we're trying to do, is get a good picture of what you're able to do for folks.
Well, we have one program called Solutions to End Homelessness. We call that our STEP program. We are the entity in St. Lawrence County that is assisting with the homelessness prevention. So people who will find themselves at risk of homelessness or are literally homeless,
Right.
because we have served a few under the bridge dwellers, can come to us and we will assist them in first month rent, security deposit,
Right.
help them locate an apartment, kind of act as a liaison between them and landlords and Department of Social Services. And the interesting part of that, we are helping people, many of whom have disability. I mean, if you're homeless, you're homeless for a reason.
case management portion.
But the side benefit to that, and I'll get to that in a minute, is that the $185,000 we spend a year is being funneled directly back into St. Lawrence County.
Right,
And it's not like the county can't use the money. So
Right.
the money comes from outside the county, and so
But it gets spent
it's a good
here.
program all the way around.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Homelessness in rural areas is often kind of invisible. It doesn't look the same as it does in urban areas where you'll actually see people on street corners and in doorways and, as you mentioned, under bridges. So it's a different kind of problem when you're serving a rural population, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And once again, there's another program idea that you could spend a good couple of hours talking about the
Sure.
homelessness problem.
Right.
And how the rural manifestation is different from urban.
Absolutely.
So I imagine that poverty affects your population, the population that you serve to quite an extent, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, and I was just listening to a program yesterday talking about how the new Farm Bill proposals may affect the SNAP benefits and other kinds of work that is done with people at risk. And so those people are on a fine edge right now in terms of falling into poverty and to falling off any kind of path of success. So the kind of advocacy work that you mentioned before is really critical for your folks, isn't it? So let's talk a little bit about, there's no cost for your services. So anybody who comes to you there's no need for them to worry about any kind of a financial commitment. You're there for them.
That's
Right.
correct. Another service that we provide is consumer-directed personal tenant services. That's called CDPAS. Great program. We're not the only provider of it in the county or the state by any means. But it is an interesting program that people with disabilities and people without disabilities really should get to know. And the reason I talk that way about the latter is disability is a club everyone will join someday.
Yes, exactly. In fact, it's, as a country, it's bigger than any other particular group in this, isn't it?
Yes.
In terms of that, because it supersedes all of the other types of isms that we have, and when we look at parts of our population.
Right. So this consumer-directed program, attendant program, allows people with disabilities, younger people, seniors with disabilities, to be able to hire a person of their own choosing to assist them in activities of daily living. And independent living centers have really tried to push away the mindset that you need to go live in a nursing home or an institution. No, I believe people want to spend their time home.
You know, I did a program last year with Andrea Montgomery, who is the director of the Office of the Aging here in
Sure.
St. Lawrence County, and that was the whole focus of our program, was making sure that seniors could stay at home. What do you have to do? How do you have to make the accommodation so that they're safe, that their space is safe, and that they have the help they need to make sure that they can stay at home? Because, as you say, going into an institution is not what any of us want to do, and it's more expensive than staying at home, too,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah. Getting people to think about the future is a very difficult thing.
Right.
And if I could throw a little anecdote out there. I went to a meeting a couple years ago. It was a senior group. I'm not going to tell you who the group was, but it was a senior group. And they were very upset because one of our local nursing homes was closing. And they felt that the politicians weren't supporting the rights of seniors, and they were very upset. And as a matter of fact, the head of this closing nursing home got up to speak and was talking about how awful it was going to be that it would close, and people were just absolutely incensed by it. Actually had signs in the audience and chanting, stomping on the floor. And I got up to speak right after this person, and I started out saying, well, that's a pretty hard act to follow, considering my message is exactly the opposite. But I'd like to ask people a question, if I could. How many people in here right now are upset that the nursing home will be closing? Well, there was yelling and sign waving and everything else. And then I said, okay, all the hands went up, and I said, okay. Now, how many in this room, and I say about 100 of you, imagine themselves 5, 10, maybe 15 years from now, living in a nursing home? Not a hand went up. Mm-hmm. So people aren't thinking ahead to the fact that they need to plan.
Right.
They can contact us.
Yeah.
They can contact us, and we will help people do some planning.
You know, one of the points that Andrea made to me during our conversation was that when you're looking at your own home and your physical space, you need to be making decisions in your middle years about what you're going to need that home to look like in your senior years, because you're going to have mobility issues. Almost everybody does, and you know there are safety considerations that need to be made, and the time to make the physical changes is when you're younger and you have the income stream to support those changes, so that you don't have to move out of your own space as you age.
And before it's an actual barrier.
That's right.
The bathroom is upstairs and you can't get up the stairs anymore.
That's
Things
right.
like that. We do offer architectural barrier removal services.
Okay.
Which is where we go into somebody's home or a business and assess what the barriers are in terms of the ADA regulations and you know, make a recommendation for that person or the agency or business for how they can make it accessible.
Right, make the modifications that they're going to need to be successful. That's a really, really important service that you offer, because a lot of people are just overwhelmed by it. All of a sudden, they come home from the hospital, or they've had some kind of maybe a bone break or a hip break or something, and all of a sudden, they simply can't do what they did before, and they really need to they don't need to think about that the day after they get home, do they?
No, but it does present a complex number of problems.
Yes,
So
it
trying
does.
to navigate through all the different systems involved is really difficult, and that is something that we do.
So
with
that's an
almost
important
everybody.
service, and I would imagine that the senior population, as we know, is growing because society is aging. More and more people are retiring, and although they think when they retire they're not going to get to that point, it's going to happen. And particularly in the North Country, our housing stock is very old. It was built well before anybody thought about wide doorways and safe bathrooms and ramps instead of steps. So all those modifications take some planning and they take some money. So that's it's something that, you know, I'm glad to hear that you provide that service and that you are encouraging people to think ahead.
I just want to be clear, we don't provide financial
No,
assistance to
I meant
make
in
the
terms of the planning.
modifications.
Yeah.
Right, but we can help the person link up with whatever resources may be out there that they could
Right.
access to help with the financial aspect of getting the modifications done
Thank
that
you.
they
You know,
need.
that's a really good point. And you know, that brings up a question. You're talking about the agency funding. Where do your funding streams come from? How are you grant based or other kinds of financial limitations?
Well, I can tell you that, and I think I speak for everybody on staff and certainly the board of directors, that although we are private not-for-profit and are able to accept donations, we are most proud of the fact that all of our money comes from contractual work that we do. Mm-hmm. And we are on a mission. We are on a mission to prove that people with disabilities can rise above other people's expectations. So when we go out and do a contract, I guess everyone would say that they do 110%, but we do. Mm-hmm. Because we have something to prove.
Sure.
So we went from 180,000 in the beginning to, I think, we're at $1.5 million now, and growing.
And in order to serve as many people as you serve, you have to be very efficient with that money, because $1.5 million sounds like a lot, but boy, it isn't when you start talking about the kind of numbers of people that you're
Well,
supporting, is it?
Well,
Yeah.
there's too much angst wrapped up in the idea that you're not serving everyone, because we certainly do want to. But just our geographical area is so immense
That's right.
that we are constantly looking for means and mechanisms of being able to expand outward from Massena.
Right.
That's why we're in Malone now, in Ogdensburg. We did go out to Watertown, we got a contract out there with Canton, Governor, Upper Lake.
Yeah.
You know,
There's all kinds of
there are
community.
areas we want to get to, and
Right.
I think we will.
And right now, so people are having to come to you right now from a lot of these areas where if you could do a little bit more expansion, you would have offices in more places in the North Country.
We do have a couple of programs that we have the Aged, Blind, and Disabled program, where we will meet with people in their home to assist them to apply for Medicaid.
Right.
And we have another contract on the way to do the same thing for Medicare. And that's recognizing that transportation is just such an issue.
It is, yeah.
I mean, if you can't afford a car,
You don't go.
you don't go.
You don't go in this county, that's for
Right.
sure, right, yeah, that's absolutely for sure. So, you've talked about what you can do. It's sometimes helpful to just sort of lay out the things that you can't do so that folks don't think, well, I could just call them and they'll solve all my problems, but there are things that you literally are not able to do for folks. For example, provide housing. I mean, that you can be maybe an advocate for them, but you don't have housing per se.
Right. We are not a place to live, no.
Right.
No, so that's a common misconception with the independent living.
Actually, that we are mandated not to be a place to live, and it kind of went into why we did the name change. We have done a doing business as name change, and we went from the Massena Independent Living, basically because I was tired of answering the phone and saying, no, we're not a nursing home, to maximizing independent living choices. And that does kind of talk about what we are, which is assisting people with disabilities discover what their potential is. Because then I will tell you, having a disability, I can tell you personally, can be tough. And I can also tell you, from a personal perspective, having a disability and being poor is not fun at all.
Yeah.
So, faced with that choice in my own life, I can tell you, I decided work was going to be what I was going to do. And it is the only path out of poverty that this country affords people.
Right. And, you know, one of the interesting things that I think we've seen a lot of in the last 10 to 15 years is assistive technology and adaptive technology. There's a lot of people who are thinking very hard about how to help folks with a physical disability overcome that because of some kind of technological assistance. That's one of the things that you can do as part of your assessment, isn't it? Is to help folks figure out what might work?
Yeah, in terms
Absolutely.
of, yeah.
I mean, we have a loan closet that people can come and borrow technologies to see if it works for them. Access VR, they started out as Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, then changed their name to Vocational Educational Services for Individuals with Disabilities, and now they are Access VR. I really don't know what that acronym stands for because it's pretty new. It's the same outfit. They are the rehabilitation services provider for people with disabilities. So they are there to assist people to find employment and education. I would recommend sometime you do a show with one of those folks.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
Right.
Let's
Clarkson has an assistive tech resource center now too.
okay, so that's right here,
Definitely
right, and that's
yeah.
helpful. Let's talk a little bit about your loan closet, because describe some of the things that you have available for folks, because that is something that's can often be very expensive to go out and buy. If it turns out it's not the right fit, then what do you do? So especially if
Donate
you've
it to
got
us.
yeah.
You know,
So
we have a lot of wheelchairs, canes, crutches, bedside commodes, raised toilet seats, things like that. The durable medical equipment. A lot of times that has to be purchased through insurance, and your doctor has to write a prescription for it, which can take time. So that's the main idea with the loan closet. Here's this temporary piece of equipment that you need to use until the insurance and the doctor and all of that goes through, and you actually get your own equipment.
Right.
So,
And sometimes the need for that equipment is quite short term. It may be like
Sometimes.
post-operation or something like that.
and sometimes it's long.
And the other thing is,
Yeah.
I want to make sure people know that if they have that kind of equipment and they're not quite sure what to do with it because either they don't need it anymore or they sort of inherited it, you guys are happy to take that, aren't you?
Yes, we will take donations for the durable medical equipment. We can't accept office beds, hospital beds,
No, right.
because they're too large and we don't have the space to store them.
Right.
But or electric wheelchairs, really. We don't have the space
Oh, the
to
little
store
carts,
them.
yeah, the little mobility carts, right. But the other kind of stuff you can all take, and so that's a,
Walkers, anything like
yeah,
that.
so that's a good way because, you know, when you have to, at some point, dispose of that stuff, you want it to go to a good home because it's not the sort of thing that, because of the expense, you want to just throw away. And sometimes it's hard to find out where the right place to give that is. So that's good to know that you are able to do that.
We have 3 pieces of equipment I'd just like to throw out there that
Okay.
people are welcome to come
Beach
use.
equipment.
Right?
Yeah.
We have a beach wheelchair with big balloon tires on it. So if somebody wanted to go to the beach, they could borrow our beach chair and use it. We have 60 feet of rubber mat to roll out over uneven or muddy ground for wheelchair users if they want to go to a wedding. So, you know, if you have a wedding coming up or an outdoor event and want
A
to borrow
family
this,
reunion?
this matting, just ask. We also have a mountain bike wheelchair.
Yeah.
For somebody
Really?
that wants to do some
Wow.
some
Off-road.
off-road trekking and see if that's for them. I just want to throw that in there. 'cause
Well, no, that's
That's kind
great.
of
Those are-
unusual stuff that we have that,
Those are not the kind of things that you would think of even, you know,
right.
being available, let alone for loan, so that's great. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking on your website is that you can help folks with health insurance in terms of the enrollment navigators and all that kind of help, because that is a very complex problem for anybody when they're trying to figure it out. And if you have specialized medical needs because of disability, it's really important that you get the right match for health insurance. So talk to us a little bit about how you can help folks.
We have the 2 health insurance enrollment programs. One is through the New York State Department of Health, which can help anybody that wants to apply for health insurance do that. And then we also have the facilitated enrollment that Jeff had touched on earlier for the age blind and disabled, which is for individuals who are disabled on Medicare and have high health expenses out of pocket. Get them enrolled in Medicaid and get them eligible for that.
Okay, and both of those are complex processes if you're trying to do it on your own. So having that kind of expert help is really, really important because there is nothing more intimidating than paperwork, especially when you're trying to deal with problems that are completely pervading your life. So is there a way for folks to help you with the work you do? You do take donations for your loan closet. You take other kinds of donations if people would like to give you. You take money, right? In terms of being able to continue doing your work.
Financial contribution. We don't ask for that.
I don't
but-
solicit, well, we don't solicit
Yeah.
them.
Right.
But if you want to know what people can do to help us, I want to phrase this correctly. We are the watchdogs of the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance. So if you see a ramp out there, in many cases you see an elevator out there, we had a hand in it. Because here it is, 20-some years past the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there are still businesses out there that are not accessible to people in a wheelchair. And when we approach them, it's always, oh, I didn't know. Maybe. But we know that any change, people are resistant to change. People don't like to spend money if they don't have to spend money. But if everybody out there were to recognize that, boy, someday I'd like to get in that place that has steps. Someday. And said something to people. It would make our job, and our job is to make this world, accessible to everyone, that would be helpful.
So, again, that's part of your advocacy work, and people, you know, if they see that there's a barrier out there, you can be a good open door to getting that conversation started, maybe
Absolutely.
with the place that hasn't done the work it needs to do to be accessible. So that's good to know.
Yes.
I always tell people too, if you're not sure if we're the right ones to help you, call us, and if we're not, we will make sure we link you with what other
So,
options.
as a referral service, that a lot of your work is referral, but it's also doing, as we said before, that assessment of people's individual needs.
And
So-
coordinating all those different,
Right.
a lot of people don't recognize all the different programs that are available to help them, so.
That's true. And one of the pieces that I wanted to touch on was for anybody who is navigating the public school system with a child with special needs, because you can help them with that process. And for anybody who's ever gone through that, it's very intimidating the first time through. And it takes you a long time to figure out what your rights are, what your child's rights are, and what the school has to do. And so the fact that you have some experts with that is very important, because it takes away the ignorance that makes the whole process that much harder on the family.
Exactly, yeah. Facilitating, cooperation between the family and the school is a huge part of the educational advocacy, helping both sides understand.
That's right.
The parents want this, well, okay, this is why they want that. The school can't provide that, this is why the school can't provide that.
Right.
A lot of times, just mediating between the two is a huge,
Service that you offer.
Yeah.
That's great. And and any time that you're navigating a system and you don't have all of the information, you always feel at a loss, and you're not going to be able to get what you want or need. And so having people who've walked a mile in those shoes and can help you do that process is very, very important.
right.
So, well, I appreciate you both coming in today and talking to us about this. The work you're doing is very important, and I like to say that in the North Country we have a lot of resources, but we don't always know what those resources are. So you've helped to shine some light on what you folks can do, and the fact that you're expanding across the North Country into 4 counties now is really important for our entire population. So thank you both very much for coming in. Any last final thoughts?
Well, I guess if you have any need of any of the services that we provide, just
Pick up the phone.
do not hesitate to pick up the phone.
Call, we also have a Facebook page and a website, so,
You're easy to get to.
yeah.
At least in terms of that, maybe not driving across the county, but you're easy to get to by phone or.
No, but that's a
through
big
your
deal
website.
though, is that,
It is.
as a resource specialist, I am able to go out to people,
Mhm.
so that helps a lot. I mean, I don't want to get into it.
Okay, great, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
So, these conversations have been a production of North Country Matters, which is filmed here in the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center of the Pottstown Public Library. This shows a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County, and the Pottstown Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters. Leigh, thank you so much.